Welcome to Hold the Mustard, a show about food. I'm Kendall Hallman. A few weeks ago, I traveled to Huntington, West Virginia to see a community production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory directed by three of my favorite podcasters, Justin, Sydney, and Clint McElroy. That part's a story in and of itself. It was a great production, and I even got to meet Clint, who also played Grandpa Joe. But there's no way I could justify the 3-hour drive just to see a play. Luckily, Huntington, West Virginia has several hot dog spots worth checking out. First, we have Hillbilly Hot Dogs, about 15 minutes outside of Huntington. I'd heard it mentioned before on the McElroy's podcast, but I didn't know much else. I looked at their website, and it definitely looked like the sort of place I like to try on these trips. Their menu was extensive, sort of. I could tell that they were trying to be one of those, look at all the crazy things we put on hot dogs type places. But they really had about 9 ingredients that they mixed in different combinations for each of their themed dogs. As I approached the place, driving on a highway adjacent to the Ohio River, I noticed people parked on the side of the road well before the restaurant was in sight. Then I drove right past it. It's just right there on the highway. I got turned around and found my way back. There was very little parking, but I guess people knew that and preemptively parked on the street because there actually was a spot available for me in the lot. There were hundreds of people in line on this weird property full of garbage art and signs with cheesy jokes on them like you'd see at a certain type of family restaurant or sports bar. Again, hundreds of people, many of whom rode motorcycles. I spoke with one group who'd ridden in from Newark, Ohio, and a lady who drove up from Kentucky. They said all sorts of things that would have made great sound clips, but nobody actually wanted to be recorded in spite of waiting in line with me for 2 hours. Based on Yelp reviews, the line is consistently an hour or more. I should have checked this because I was there on a Saturday afternoon in early June, probably one of the busiest days of the year for a place like that. The garbage art and cheesy jokes were legitimately charming, and there was even a bulletin board with printouts of 10-year-old memes at one spot. Waiting in line was definitely part of the experience, but 2 hours was just a bit much. I think if I'd been there when the line was an hour, or if I was with a group, so I could step out of line for a minute to do like a photo op or use the restroom, etc., I wouldn't have had any issue, but again, 2 hours and it was hot. When I finally was able to enter the restaurant, I saw the reason for the long line. In spite of the hundreds of people in line, there was only one register taking orders, and she was taking her time. Probably took about 5 or 10 minutes for the two parties in front of me to put their orders in. I don't want this to sound like being a difficult customer writing a Yelp review, but 2 hours and only one register open is pretty rough. It's pretty clear that the long line is manufactured so people can say, I drove 2 hours and then waited an hour in line for a hot dog. I put my order in for a hillbilly dog, hold the mustard, which was a deep fried dog with chili and onions, and a pine Appalachian, which was a boiled dog with ham, pineapple, and barbecue sauce. 5 minutes later, I finally had my dogs. So if you were thinking that they only had one register going as to not overwhelm the kitchen, the fact that I only waited a few minutes after the order was placed would suggest otherwise. The kitchen probably could have handled a little bit more. That's the register was definitely the bottleneck. This is also the moment that I realized, in spite of the long line, I only saw a handful of people actually eating their food. When I was in line, I'd assumed that was due to people eating inside the restaurant, but once I placed my order, I saw no one was eating inside. The handful of people that did have food were all eating outside. All of this would have been fine if the hot dogs were good. The hillbilly dog had chili that I did not like. It was a sort of bitter and had another seasoning I can't quite place. And I also really prefer shredded cheese on my chili dogs and didn't realize that this didn't come with shredded cheese. The pineapple one was better, but I don't know why you would ever serve boiled hot dogs when you're set up for deep fried. The deep fried hot dog on the Hillbilly Dog definitely elevated the sandwich, but not enough to make up for the long wait. If you find yourself in Huntington, I would just park, do a photo op, and either not worry about getting any food or make sure you're with a group. Then again, maybe if you went on a random weekday in spring or fall, it would only be a 45-minute wait, and the novelty would make up for the mediocre food. I don't know. There are restaurants that I love that I won't go to at certain times of the day or week because I know they'll be too crowded. But something about this just hits different. I'm not sure if I would have been more forgiving on the quality with the shorter wait, if it was only 30 to 45 minutes, but I do travel long distance to try hot dogs. And there are places like Rutt's Hut that I build up in my head for literal decades. I take a bite and I say, yes, this was worth it. Hillbilly Dogs was not one of those places. The novelty of the garbage art, the artificial long line, and the inflated menu all came together to hide the fact that their hot dogs just weren't anything special. Next, I went over to Frost Stop, located next to Marshall University campus, with seating consisting of plastic picnic tables in a patio. This was your typical root beer hot dog stand. I ordered a root beer and a chili dog with onions and cheese. They asked if I wanted melted or sliced cheese. I guess people don't usually put cheese on chili dogs in West Virginia, maybe? I asked for melted, knowing it would likely be some sort of processed Velveeta type cheese, but I'd rather that than a slice of American. So the hot dog came out. The chili was a similar style to Hillbilly's, but I liked it a lot better. It didn't have that weird bitter flavor that had turned me off. And the processed cheese was fine. The root beer, though, was amazing. It's hard with these special root beer stand root beers to say which is best, but this one had a strong, sweet cane sugar flavor and hit the spot right when I was questioning whether my best hot dog tasting days were behind me. Finally, I went over to Stewart's Original Hot Dogs. By this time, my stomach was not feeling great between the hours in the car, time in the sun, and of course, 3 hot dogs, 2 of which had chili on top. So I decided I didn't have it in me to do another chili dog. And even though Stewart's also has world famous root beer, I didn't want to overdo it with the soda. Instead, I decided to order a plain hot dog and a corn dog, assuming that I would take a few bites of each and either save the rest or toss the rest. Stewart's Original Hot Dogs was your traditional drive-in. I pulled in, turned my lights on, as I guess is the custom at these places, and was immediately helped. My experience waiting 2 hours at Hillbilly Hot Dogs totally messed me up for how quick these next 2 places were. Before I knew it, I had 2 hot dogs and was on my way. The plain hot dog was pretty solid. I want to say it was a beef frank with a mild flavor. I was advertised as being deep fried, but if it wasn't left in the oil long enough to get that crunch you sometimes get from a good deep fried hot dog. The corn dog, though, was amazing. Outside of state fairs, I feel like it's hard to find a decent corn dog anywhere. Sometimes I'll bake some frozen corn dogs from Kroger, or a random bar will have mini corn dogs, but you can tell when a place has a real deep fried corn dog, and this was it. It made me want to go back to Frost Stop and try their corn dogs. Having had my fill of hot dogs, I drove around Huntington until it was time to watch the play, which was a blast and made great time driving home. In other hot dog news, I gave Junkyard Dogs in Columbus another try and was so much happier with it than my first experience. I don't remember if I mentioned it in last year's hot dog special because I didn't want to be too negative, but let's just say I had been underwhelmed. This time around, I got the New Yorker, hold the mustard, a snappy beef frank with grilled onions and sauerkraut. Huge recommend. Just a note, in between writing this script and making this recording, went back another time and my wife tried the grilled chicken sandwich. Do not recommend the grilled chicken sandwich, but the hot dogs, still excellent. And also I've tried a milkshake there, and their milkshakes were excellent. Lastly, I picked up a pack of 5-star footlong hot dogs, which popped up in stores before the 4th of July holiday. I've always loved the idea of footlong hot dogs, but you can't always find good ones at the store, especially the buns. But 5-star hot dogs live up to their names. The New Jersey style mix of chicken, pork, and beef give them enough flavor without being overwhelming. And I added a little canned Tony Paco chili to make it all the better. Now that I've spent way too much time talking about meat, here's an interview about vegan cooking with my friend Rae.
And I just think pancakes are so easy. But if I do get to a place that has vegan pancakes, it's something weird, like vegan protein pancakes with buckwheat and
Right.
almond flour, and they're gluten free and healthy. And I'm like, I want a regular pancake smothered with syrup. So, and I can never get it unless I go to like a vegan restaurant.
Okay. Well, let's just start with that then. Why don't you just go ahead and run through the vegan pancake recipe? And we're
Oh,
the
sure.
now we're on the
Now
podcast
we're
has
on.
started.
Yeah, and hopefully every restaurant out there that serves breakfast and wants to add a vegan item to the menu to be more accessible for people can hear this, and then they can see how
Mm-hmm.
easy it is to make vegan pancakes. So, when I make vegan pancakes on generally the weekends, sometimes during the week, it's the same base recipe every time. You start with a cup of flour, about a tablespoon of sugar, a pinch of salt, a tablespoon of baking powder, and then kind of mix that together. And then I add uh, a cup of soy milk and 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil. Mix that up. Get your pan preheated on the stove, and I usually do quarter cup size batter to pour onto the pan to make the pancakes. Medium low heat, and you pour it on. Wait till it's bubbling and ready to flip. You flip it once, cook it for another few seconds until it's done, and there you go. You serve it up with your vegan butter, maple syrup, or just the maple syrup. You can add whatever kind of ingredients you want in there. Wally's favorite is blueberry, so I always do blueberry for him. I like plain or chocolate chip myself. Lucy also prefers blueberry, so I usually make plenty of blueberry for both of them. But yeah, it serves 2 people and a baby.
All right. Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned that. I think sometimes I might accidentally make vegan pancakes. Um, I don't know if I don't because I don't know if Hungry Jack the powder that I use has any meat or has any animal products in it or not. I don't know if it has like powdered eggs or anything. But yeah, I mean the if you're making it does seem like that would be an easy option. And also, like, I mean, I not that I have ever taken any action on this, but one of the reasons that I was interested in talking to you on this, I mean, I honestly I'm a meat eater through and through, and I don't really have a lot of desire to go certainly to go vegan, but even necessarily to go vegetarian. But I do think that there's an opportunity for me to eat a a more plant-based diet. Look for those food items that are, like you said, very easy to make vegan, or to make
Yeah,
to remove that, because I acknowledge that there are uh that some of the animal products that I consume, probably those animals didn't have the best lives, and also there's environmental concerns and all this stuff, um
yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
I obviously, in my perfect world, everybody would be vegan, but I understand that that's not a thing, and
Mhm.
it's really hard to do that. You just can't ask people to give up everything. That's all they know. And I'm a huge advocate for any little bit helps. If you can, one meal a day or one meal a week, every once in a while, instead of choosing something that came from an animal choose the same thing but from a plant. I think it
Mm-hmm.
makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I make pancakes, it's with the Hungry Jack powder that you just add water to. So yeah, I don't know if those are vegan, if that's vegan or not. Um,
Yeah, I don't
so
know. I've never looked into it,
yeah,
so I'll have to
yeah,
check it out.
yeah. Would have to see. Yeah, because there's yeah, it's just yeah, it's um. I think although I will say you said fixings for pancakes. Personally, I love blueberry pancakes. But my two like sort of the ones that I will eat that I don't know that anyone besides my dad I've ever met any people that eat them is I like raisins in my pancakes. Um,
What? Oh
yeah,
my gosh, I've never even heard of it.
yeah, yeah. Especially a little bit of cinnamon in there. When I worked at Waffle House, um, and I didn't come up with this. Somebody else said that it's like a thing that they do there sometimes. But you butter up a piece of of their raisin toast and you put
Uh-huh.
it in the waffle.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it'd be like a cinnamon, and it comes out like a cinnamon raisin waffle, real good. And then the other thing that even fewer people, because people I have run into people who put raisins in their pancakes and waffles is I'll do corn. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah. I actually have made a corn jalapeno waffle before, or yeah, waffle before.
oh, that's interesting. The jalapeno would pull it
Yeah.
kind of savory.
Yeah, and I
That's an
put
interesting.
nutritional yeast in it, which is sort of like cheesy kind
Hmm,
of. And so it's like a cheesy corn jalapeno waffle.
hmm,
And if you put it
interesting.
in the Millennium Falcon waffle maker, then it's a Millennium Falcon shaped cheesy corn jalapeno
Oh
waffle.
man, I need to get a Millennium Falcon waffle maker. That sounds.
You probably do. It's pretty legit. I will say, like, because it's Millennium Falcon shaped, there's not as many like crispy edges
Hmm,
as like a regular waffle. So that's its downside, but
yeah. Our
obvious upsides.
our waffle maker belonged to my grandparents. I don't know. I think it belonged to my grandparents, and then it belonged to my parents, and then it, like not that it's like a passed down from generation to generation, but it is probably 30 or 40 years old. That but It still works great. But it's because I like when I make waffles, I like to make them thin. I don't like
Okay.
all. I feel like most of the waffle makers you buy now are Belgian waffles.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so I put out the call for people that wanted to talk about baking, and you said you do vegan baking, and and then it's not really baking season anymore. It's more other stuff. Uh, so we're just going to talk to you in general about vegan cooking, and then you can share some of your vegan baking recipes. So how long have you been vegan?
It was 2016. So what are we going on? 8 years? If
Eight
I can
years,
do
yeah.
math.
Wild
Yeah.
that that's 8 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I actually started initially for health reasons, and I did this thing. Do you know who Jenna Marbles is?
I do not.
Okay, so she's like a big, or was a big YouTube star, and I consume a lot of YouTube, and I really liked her, looked up to her. She was like really, you know, beautiful and thin, and I needed to lose some weight, and so I was like, oh, Jenna Marbles eats vegan during the week, and then she eats whatever she wants on the weekend, and so that's what I did, and then after a while trying to find different recipes and things, because I was eating like frozen veggies for dinner and it was
Mm,
just really sucky and boring. I didn't know how to eat vegan.
mm,
Um, I started coming across like a lot of really horrendous content and eventually I was like, yeah, I ethically can't eat animals anymore.
mm.
And so then I went full vegan. But that's my story, Jenna Marbles. Thanks for
Okay,
making me vegan.
so this is how out of touch I am. You said horrendous content. I thought you were gonna go into all of the all of the bad vegan recipes that you ran into, but you're talking about the ethics of the meat industry and everything.
Yes,
Um,
and
okay.
incidentally, there were bad vegan recipes. I tried to make vegan chili cheese burritos,
Hmm.
and the smell was so disgusting that I couldn't eat. I mean, like, I couldn't eat it. Like, the taste, it
Mm,
tasted like it smelled. It was awful.
right, right.
I would not recommend those.
Yeah, I had an epiphany a little while ago, or either that or else my social media algorithms just got out of whack. I don't know if it's because I started doing this podcast or because I started posting pictures of hot dogs on my Facebook, um, but I get pushed so many videos of recipes, and I watch them cook, and I'm like, you didn't cook that. Like, there's one that I keep getting pushed. It's somebody's making like a breakfast. I think it's like a breakfast taco, and he puts raw sausage on a tortilla, like directly on the tortilla, like you would like refried beans or something, and
Hmm.
then he cooks one side of the sausage, doesn't cook the other side of the sausage, and burns the one side, and does the other stuff, and I'm like, that's not how you cook that.
Yeah, I've seen people do that. That's like a trend.
Yeah, it's like I think it's just because people make those videos to make food that looks good, but if you actually, not that I know anything about cooking, but even if you know the littlest bit about cooking, you're like, you didn't that didn't come out tasting good. um yeah, so you started for health reasons, and moved into moved into it for for the ethics and everything. So one thing, like, I struggle functioning as an adult. That's one of the reasons that I started this podcast, was to get people to tell me how to cook for myself. um but so much of the American diet is based around um is based around eating animal products. And also so much of American culture is or at least, the sort of the lifestyles that a lot of us live lend to going out to eat a lot. Now, you said for breakfast, a lot of times you have very limited vegan options. Uh, uh, what as far as going out to eat, what are your what are some challenges, and how have you, like, gone around those challenges to make sure you still, can still feed yourself when you're out?
Yeah. So obviously, I live in the Twin Cities, and so there's a lot of vegan options. Like, pretty much, I mean, there are several vegan restaurants. We have one that's just 10, 15 minutes from us that we go to fairly frequently. Um, there are several restaurants that have vegan options that also have non-vegan options. But I have an app called Happy Cow, and you just like type in where your area where you're looking to find a vegan restaurant, and you can choose like veg options or vegetarian or vegan or whatever, and it'll give you like all your options. I've also gotten like pretty familiar with how I can eat vegan at like restaurants that don't have a designated vegan menu. Like, for instance, Taco Bell is something that I frequent all the time at work. We have a Taco Bell in town where I work, and I can eat a I get the cheesy bean and rice burrito fresco style. And when you say fresco style, they take off all the dairy. So they would take off, it's like a cheese sauce and like a creamy jalapeno sauce. Um, and they add pico de gallo in its place. And so I like to sometimes mix it up and add potatoes to it or guacamole, but it's usually just because it's $1 for the cheesy bean and rice burrito fresco style, and so I get two of them. Sometimes I get the cinnamon twists if I'm in a sweet mood, because those are also incidentally vegan. But I think just being vegan for so long, I know a lot of the things that are vegan, um, and and generally a lot of restaurants have clearly labeled vegan options.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I navigate it.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So I always say we've gotten through the part of the recipe article that you skip. So let's talk about the actual recipes that you brought today. So you've got a
That
chocolate chip cookie recipe, and you said a Norwegian dessert as well.
I do. Yeah, and can I just say that is so true. And if a website is not courteous enough to have a jump to recipe button at the top, I'm like, no, your recipe is not good enough for me. Goodbye.
Well, fortunately,
Like,
we I put the recipes in the show notes. So if people want to just jump to the recipes, but I assume that people are probably not coming to this podcast just for the recipes. But who knows?
probably not.
Maybe someday if I put out more than 3 episodes a year. Um,
I I think that they're coming to hear how to make vegan chocolate chip cookies.
all right. So yeah. So go ahead. How's it go? How's it work?
I'll start with that. So, I will tell you my secret for my vegan chocolate chip cookies. I use the recipe on the back of the Nestle Toll House chocolate chips, the semi-sweet morsels. That's what I
Okay.
grew up eating. Unfortunately, Nestle Toll House chocolate chips are not vegan. So I get the Enjoy Life brand, but there's a whole variety of vegan chocolate chips. There's tons of brands out there. My secret to finding vegan stuff, you look on the back in the ingredients, and because dairy and egg are both allergens, they have to bold them at the bottom. So it will say contains, and if it says contains milk or contains egg, then it's not vegan. But if it just says something like contains wheat or contains soy, then it's okay. Um, that's generally a good rule for finding a vegan product. So, like a lot of breads out there are already vegan, um, crackers, chips, different things like that. But that's how I find the vegan chocolate chips. So, I get the Enjoy Life brand. Flour, a lot of people ask me this, all purpose flour, it's vegan. It comes from wheat. That's a plant. So, baking soda, salt, those are vegan. Crisco, incidentally, is vegan. Um, I don't know that Crisco is on the Nestle recipe, actually. I think my family does half Crisco and half butter, and that's where I got that from in the recipe. But I use vegan butter, obviously. Uh, a pretty accessible one is Country Crock plant butter. It comes in sticks, or you can buy it in like soft form that comes in a tub. I buy it at Cub Foods. I think it's really delicious. I would not buy Earth Balance. I used to buy Earth Balance. It's just not very good. It doesn't taste good.
So that's that. I was gonna ask you about Earth Balance because I worked in a fair trade coffee shop that had a number of vegan and gluten free offerings, and
Mm,
it was when I understand that people have gluten intolerances, but I think there was also a time when somehow everyone did.
yes,
And
yes, it's very
and
popular.
and that was when I worked there. And yeah, we had Earth Balance. I actually don't mind. I actually didn't mind it, but I'm good to know that there's other stuff that's better. Also, yeah,
Yeah,
I think one of my you kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, but one thing, you said all purpose flour is vegan. It's interesting
yep,
because like so many of the vegan offerings that we had at the coffee shop that I worked at were also, were also gluten free and
yes,
therefore also tasted bad.
yes,
Um
yeah,
and it's like it's just like I don't know, it's just like I do feel like sometimes places in the they want to make stuff sound, healthy and special or fit into 17 different, square pegs into round holes and whatnot. And so it's, it's nice to hear you given these these from a mindset, from a more practical mindset of like your goal is to be, I mean, you eliminated the animal products, that's enough. You don't also have to eliminate the soy and the wheat and the, I don't know, nuts or what,
Sure.
whatever
No,
else.
I've got a couple of vegan friends who are gluten free. One of them has celiac,
Hmm.
and so she has to be very careful. One of them has a gluten intolerance, I guess.
Hmm.
I know some people who avoid gluten for, I'm not sure why, but they
Hmm.
just do. But yeah, a lot of things tend to be gluten free and vegan. I think it makes it easier for people who are obviously gluten free and vegan,
Hmm.
but
Oh yeah.
it it doesn't make it as tasty for me when I'm looking for like a delicious glutinous vegan
Hmm.
bread,
Hmm.
and you know you can't get it. But
Right, right. Yeah,
um,
yeah. It's just yeah, like I said, it's like eliminating the animal products is enough, and that doesn't, I understand that everyone has different dietary restrictions, and yeah, I mean maybe it's also like it's there are maybe some foods that are just like you were talking about pancakes being very easy to make it vegan. Maybe there's some foods that it's also pretty easy to eliminate the gluten, but
yeah,
but also like some of it not so much, and it's, and sometimes it's, you just get a little suspicious about that, and it's also, it's like that's something that I've run into. Not that I mean, I'm a modern diabetic, so I eat sugar, I eat probably more carbs than I should, but but when you look for low carb options, sometimes uh things will end up being gluten free, when it's like that's not, I'm not interested in that. I'm just looking for a low carb option there.
yeah, yeah, I can see that. I will say though, I feel bad because being a person who has a special diet, the the gluten-free people, like if they go to an event and there's no like gluten-free option, that is so sucky. And I can
Hmm.
totally relate to that if there's no vegan option. And so I try, like I've done cupcakes for past Star Wars events, and
Hmm.
I always get a gluten-free option. I know one of Wally's former students is gluten free, and I think there's at least one other person in the Star Wars community who's gluten free. Um, and
Hmm.
so I think it's good to have a gluten free
Right,
option,
right.
and sometimes it is really good. Like there's a vegan cupcake. Well, I call it a cupcake place, but it's called Vegan East. They're a vegan bakery here in Minneapolis, and they make delicious vegan and gluten free cupcakes that
Hmm.
I would never have guessed they were gluten free. So,
Yeah, yeah.
it can be great.
We had one baker at the coffee shop that she was she had trained in France as a to be a pastry chef, and she had some gluten free offerings that it was just like, it was like naturally, it was all butter and sugar, or I or even, no, no, actually, I think it was. I don't think these were vegan. I think they were. It was some kind of pastry that was all butter and sugar, and it's like if it's
Yeah.
all butter and sugar, then that, there's no gluten in that. Uh,
Yeah.
so it was like, yeah, it was gluten free. It's like, yeah, because it never was in the first place. It's
Yep.
sort of like, vegan green beans. Uh,
Yes. Yeah. My grandma one time messaged and asked how she could make a vegan salad. And I thought that was incredibly thoughtful, but also at the same time, she didn't put much thought into the question.
Although
So,
I will say, you do have to. I'm sure you do have to ask about green beans being vegan, because a lot
they
of
could have
times,
butter.
yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
ham and bacon. Um,
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
all right, so you can get back to the recipe now. Sorry, I interjected there.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So back to the chocolate chip Nestle Toll House vegan version. So we've got our flour, baking soda, salt, our vegan butter, and Crisco or both. Then we get to the sugar. Sugar you do have to be careful with. Um, I did not know this, but apparently a lot of sugar is filtered through bone char.
Hmm.
which is not vegan. Bones, not cool. So if you buy the really expensive organic sugar, it's generally vegan, comes in a very tiny bag, and costs twice as much as the regular sugar. Um, I do that at home, but like if I'm out at a restaurant and they have a vegan cookie and it says it's vegan, I'm not going to ask them if it's made with organic sugar because I just ultimately don't care enough.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
like I have some friends who will like call up a cereal company and ask them like, is there sugar filtered through bone char? I cannot be bothered.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
if it's not overtly non-vegan, then I'm gonna eat it.
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, I no,
So
I understand, and there's probably there's probably argument if it's bone char. There's probably argument for that's probably waste that animal waste that would go to waste anyway.
yeah.
Um, that's something with hot dogs. People are like, oh, those hot dogs are made with all the grossest parts of the animals. It's like I'm like, good. I'd rather I'd rather be eating it than
Then throwing it
have it
out.
get thrown away.
Sure.
If you can make an old shoe taste good, then more power to you.
Um, so after the sugar, then we get to vanilla extract, and egg. So the egg part, there are many different ways you can go about substituting something for egg. So things like applesauce. I tend to not use applesauce ever because in my mind that's like healthy. And if I'm making a cookie, I want it to be like a good cookie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want a healthy applesauce cookie. Um, so I tend to use, there's a product called Bob's Red Mill Vegan Egg, and it's weird. It's like a powder that comes in a bag, and I think it's gluten free. I'm pretty sure I buy it in the gluten free section of the grocery store. I don't have to buy it very often because it's shelf stable, and so it just like sits in my pantry. You scoop out, it's like a tablespoon of the mix, and then you add like 2-3 tablespoons of water and let it sit, and it thickens up, and then that acts as your binder. So you do 2 eggs according to the Nestle Toll House recipe. I usually do 2 Bob's Red Mill vegan eggs because it's super easy. When I first went vegan, I often did flax eggs, which work just as well. It works basically the same. So lots of different things you can use for egg. Oil you can use for egg. You can use aquafaba, which is like the water from a can of chickpeas. That one I find is really good if you need like whipped egg whites. So like my great grandma's banana bread recipe calls for whipped egg whites, and you can whip the chickpea water into like an egg white like substance. It smells horrible, but it totally works. There's also a product called Just Egg, and it's like comes in a carton, and you can measure out a couple tablespoons of that to use as your eggs, but it's more expensive, and I find that is better for like scrambling um, than baking. Unless you're making something crepey, then the Just Egg is like the king.
Okay.
But I it depends on the recipe. Chocolate chip cookies, something like that, you can do pretty much any kind of vegan egg that you want. And then the chocolate chips, and that's it. You mix together your dry ingredients separately, the wet ingredients separately, and then you add them together and use your cookie scoop, and it makes like 4 or 5 dozen cookies. You bake them at, I think it's like 375 for 9 to 11 minutes. But again, it's on the back of the
Hmm.
Nestle Toll House chocolate chips bag. But don't buy those because those aren't vegan.
Right, right. Sounds good.
So yeah, that's
Cook
chocolate chip cookies.
Cookie recipes always make so many cookies.
Yeah, I will say that because it's just Wally and I and the baby doesn't eat cookies,
Hmm.
I usually cut it in half or quarter it if I'm making cookies, because then otherwise we will eat all of them. And, you know, that's not good. So it's better, like, I mean, we'll eat all of them regardless, but if I make
Right.
a whole recipe, then I'm eating 5 dozen cookies.
Right. Right.
Whereas if I make like a half or a quarter, it's a lot less.
Mhm.
So that's better. I always tell myself, like, if I do make a full recipe, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put those in the freezer,
Yeah.
pull them
Yeah.
out like later. But like when I pull them out is the next day
Right.
after
Right.
the cookies are all gone.
Well, I mean, they do freeze, and they are. I have found that people will accept baked goods when you give them to them. So
That's true. That's true. But like, I want to eat them.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and yeah, and so let's go to the other recipe.
Okay. So this is called kringla, not to be confused with kringle, which is Danish, I believe. Kringla it's sort of a soft, very plain cookie, and it's Norwegian. And this is my grandma's secret recipe. She I'm obviously giving you the vegan version. I think she's okay with it. I hope. I will say, like, she used to make, like, when my grandpa was alive, she would make, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 dozen kringla over Christmas time, and then they would sell them at their church bake sale. But you were supposed to give the recipe out, and she actually gave a fake recipe.
Oh wow.
She did not give them her real one. So, anyways, this makes only 2 dozen cookies. So, this is a good one to try. But it's a half a cup of sugar. Again, you got to get the expensive stuff if you want it to be vegan. A half a cup of vegan butter. Again, I like the country crock plant butter. Comes in sticks, and you just, has the tablespoon markings on the side. And then for this one, I use aquafaba. I can't remember when I was trying out different versions of the recipe. This is just what worked the best. Part of it is that the kringla is a white cookie, and so if you use something that has color, it's going to have a weird color. And aquafaba is like clear, colorless, white kind of. So you do 3 tablespoons of that. And then my grandma's secret is sour cream. So it's a cup of vegan sour cream. Now, this can be hard to find. There are different kinds of vegan sour cream. I think the best one is tofuti. I have a hard time finding it. Sometimes it's not at our Cub Foods. I have to go to like Whole Foods or the co-op to get it. Um, but I find tofuti to be the best vegan sour cream. The Daya one is horrible. I wouldn't recommend it. Anything Daya, I wouldn't recommend it. Daya, I'm not sure how you say it, but that was the vegan cheese that ruined the vegan chili cheese burritos I tried to make. Um,
Oh
so a
man,
cup of the
some vegan
vegan.
cheeses. There was a vegan cheese that we had at the coffee shop for there was a lady that made pizza, and there were a bunch of other problems with her. She would like disappear for months on end, but that
Oh,
it was like it was shredded. It looked like shredded cheese when it was cold, and then you'd cook it, and it would still look that way.
yeah, yeah. I will say this, like vegan cheese is not good. Um, I generally don't buy any vegan cheese. Like if I'm going to eat pizza, it's just not going to have cheese on it. If I'm going to eat tacos, they're not going to have cheese. I've just learned to live that way because I think that 99.999% of vegan cheese is absolutely disgusting. The only vegan cheese that I eat on a regular basis is there's a vegan Parmesan cheese that I make. The recipe is from Minimalist Baker, and it's just cashews, nutritional yeast, salt, and garlic powder, and you just blend it up, and it's pretty good. Um, and then I recently found Baby Bell makes a vegan cheese, and it is delicious. It's like cheese.
Hmm.
I couldn't believe it how cheesy it was. I can't speak to like it melting. I don't know about that. It probably doesn't. Um, but that's pretty good. So that's the only one that I would ever recommend to anybody. I wouldn't recommend any other vegan cheese.
Okay.
So, yeah. So back to the recipe. You've got your cup of vegan sour cream, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 2 1/4 cups of flour. So you cream your sugar and butter together. You add in your aquafaba, your sour cream, your sifted dry ingredients, mix it well, and then you refrigerate it for several hours or overnight. And then you take about an ounce, it looks like, according to my notes, a walnut sized ball of dough, and you roll it out onto a floured surface to the size of like a wooden pencil, if anybody knows what those are anymore, about 7 inches long. Um, and then you form it into a figure eight, press the ends together lightly, and you bake it at my grandma's recipe says 350 for 8 to 10 minutes. I guess I, according to my notes here, bake it at 375 for 12 minutes. Um, so yeah,
All right.
that's the recipe. And it's just a delicious, soft, not overly sweet Norwegian cookie. And it's Wally's favorite of the Christmas cookies that I make. And so I make it every year.
All right. Well, so this will be a good episode to repost at Christmas time because we got some
Yeah,
good cookie recipes. So I'm gonna there's one last thing I want to talk to you about. I'm gonna actually skip the regular questionnaire. I'll have to ask that the next time you're on.
sure.
But because yeah, you're welcome back. You're welcome back anytime. I'm sure that anything we talk about, there's a vegan version of it. Um,
Absolutely.
but I want to talk to you about vegan non about fake meat. Let's say.
Okay. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So two things. First of all, I intellectually I know that sausages and hot dogs and things, a lot of the reason they taste the way they are is because of the seasonings and the chemicals and stuff, and it really
Yeah.
does seem like you'd be able to make a pretty good fake one of those. But I'm scared to try them, and sometimes when I've seen other people try them, they didn't look very appetizing. So for
Yeah.
what do you what's your go-to for like a vegan sausage or a vegan hot dog?
So I'm not a big hot dog fan. I have got like field roast vegan hot dogs, or I think Morning Star. Yeah,
Mhm.
Morning Star. Morning Star makes a mean vegan corn dog. Like we eat those from time to time. Well,
Okay.
Wally doesn't like to eat the corn dogs, but I like to eat them. But I suppose that's a hot dog in a cornbread.
Corn dogs
So
definitely count as hot dogs. Yes.
yeah.
Yes,
So
that
I
is
would totally
definitely a thing.
recommend the Morningstar vegan corn dog. I think they're delicious. Now, I will say this as well, speaking to hot dogs. Um, so I am old. Um, let's see. I'm 37. When I was 14, I stopped eating beef. So I haven't eaten a hot dog in like over 20
Oh
years.
wow.
Um, so I think Morningstar corn dogs are really good, but my family tells me that I have trash taste because I don't remember what it is like. So you could just take that as you will.
Mhm, mhm.
But that's my recommendation, I guess, for a hot dog. As far as sausage, again, haven't eaten sausage for a long time, but Beyond Meat makes a sweet Italian, a spicy Italian, or a mild Italian. They might have both. And then they also make a vegan brat. I love
Mhm.
all of them. Like,
Okay.
I make biscuits and gravy with the hot Italian style uh, Beyond sausage, and it's delicious. Like, biscuits and gravy is Wally's favorite breakfast, and we don't have it that often, but definitely when we're camping, I always tend to make biscuits and gravy and then just occasionally at home I'll make it.
Mhm.
And I use that sausage. So that's what I would recommend.
That's so that's very helpful actually. My sister-in-law, she's Muslim, so she doesn't eat pork, and I've been looking for a sausage alternative for making biscuits and gravy for her sometime. And
Yeah,
yeah.
you might consider trying so there's two like major brands in my mind that make really good dupes for ground meats, and they're Beyond and Impossible.
Hmm.
I think so Wally likes Impossible products better.
Hmm.
Impossible does make a sausage. It comes in like a tube like you'd buy a pound of hamburger.
Hmm.
But they also make burgers. Beyond also makes burgers. Beyond burgers are my preference. I don't think they taste like as hamburgery. And I think that's why I like
Hmm.
them. They're like their own thing. Where like an Impossible burger tastes like a burger, and
Hmm.
I just I will not eat them unless it's my only option.
Mm.
Where
Interesting.
Wally prefers the Impossible burgers because I think it does taste more
Right.
meat
Right.
like. So,
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one of the struggles with Impossible is that that meat eaters are going to eat meat, and then vegetarians and vegans, if you haven't had meat in a long time and then you have an Impossible, it reminds you too much of meat. I have actually tried an Impossible burger.
yeah.
I had an Impossible slider at White Castle, which I don't think,
Oh,
do you guys have
sure.
White Castles in
Yeah, there's one in Hinckley, Minnesota, and I we used to stop there from time to time. Hinckley was on the way home to my
Mm,
parents' place when we would visit them when they lived in
mm.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, my wife and I, I mean, I go there regularly, but my wife and I go there every Valentine's Day. They decorate the store and they do table service and
Yeah,
all
I've
sorts of things.
seen
It's great.
that. That's so
Yeah,
cute.
it's great. It's great because it's like it's one of those things. It's like you can go to a fancy restaurant any night of the year. You can only get table service at White Castle one night of the year. But I enjoyed the Impossible slider. The problem was that it was not exactly a White Castle slider. You know, just like like you get a White Castle, you have that like very specific expectation. Like it tasted like another restaurant's version of the White Castle slider, and so it wasn't. But I feel like if I had like some like upscale burger place that had that I hadn't had before, and I had the Impossible slider, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, I
So it
could see
is.
that. If it's something you eat all the time,
Yeah.
you're gonna be like expecting a specific
Mm,
texture
mm.
and flavor and consistency, and then
Right,
it's
right.
not that. So
Like
yeah, that was something.
McDonald's French fries kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I definitely figured out when I first started trying to eat vegan was I had to learn very quickly I cannot cook the same things that I used to enjoy. I mean, I can. They're just going to be different. I have to have different expectations. And some things that I used to enjoy, they're just it's going to be something that I'm never going to enjoy again,
Mm.
sadly.
Well, on that note, on that uplifting note, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks a lot for coming on, Rae. This was a lot of fun. Very informative. I think it'll end up being a good episode.
Yeah, it was so fun. I would love to come on anytime you want to talk about, baking or vegan baking. I feel like we didn't talk that much about baking, but, you know, we talked about a lot of other
Yeah, yeah,
fun things and depressing things.
yeah. Welcome to a special new segment we're calling Semi Sweet, in which my wife Molly and I talk about dessert foods. In the last few weeks, we've tried 15 different flavors of cookies from the Crumbl chain of bakeries. If you're not familiar with Crumbl, they make 6 flavors of cookie every week. Each cookie is about 6 inches in diameter, and frankly, they are amazing, if a bit overpriced. Molly, what flavors have we tried so far?
Okay, so far we've had peanut butter, kitchen sink, mint cookies and cream, and semi-sweet chocolate chunk. That was the first week. Second week we did Oreo, white buttercream, birthday cake blondie, and strawberry shortcake cookie. Third week we had again semi-sweet chocolate chunk. Then we had butter cake, chocolate covered pretzel pie cookie, and lemon cupcake cookie. And then finally we had a strawberry shortcake cake, a s'mores cookie, a Boston cream cookie, and a cornbread flavored cookie.
All right. So, first of all, what do you think of Crumbl cookies as a whole? I've really been enjoying them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's fun. There's definitely like a novelty to it to like just go to a place every week and you don't know what flavors are going to be there. You know, it's fun and exciting.
All right. So we're going to talk about the most interesting cookie, the worst cookie, and our favorite cookie. So let's start with the most interesting. What was your most interesting cookie, Molly?
I think the one that I was most intrigued to try and thought was super interesting when I heard of it was the cornbread cookie. Because I was like, how do they take cornbread and make it into a cookie? So I was very interested to try it out.
So I was interested in the cornbread cookie, definitely. But then we tried it and it just kind of tasted like a sugar cookie where they accidentally added some cornbread. What I thought was the most interesting was the mint cookies and cream, because that's not really a flavor combination that I would normally gravitate towards, but it came out tasting really good. What was the worst cookie that you've tried?
I mean, it's kind of hard to choose just because Crumbl Cookies knows what they're doing and all the flavors are, pretty good when it comes down to it. But I think the worst for me, honestly, was the s'mores cookie. Unfortunately, I think they were trying to do some sort of like graham cracker cookie, in the cookie itself, and then the toppings were the melted chocolate and the marshmallow. But something about the cookie itself, I didn't like. It wasn't graham crackery enough for me, so it was disappointing.
So I would say, of all the cookies we've tried, there were 3 that I didn't like, which were the peanut butter, the kitchen sink, and the cornbread cookie. The problem was that I just didn't like the peanut butter cookie base. It was really coarse and didn't really, I don't know, it didn't work for me.
It had like no peanut butter flavor. I remember that.
Yeah. And then the kitchen sink cookie had like potato chips and chocolate chips and different things that didn't really add to it. So I think that's probably my least favorite. Oh, and it was a peanut butter cookie base. So I think that was the one that worked for me the least. Although the cornbread cookie was probably the biggest disappointment, because I thought it was going to be something interesting, and then it ended up not being great. What was your favorite?
So my favorite was one that you did mention already that you found, I think it was your interesting one, the mint chocolate or mint cookies and cream. Yeah, that one I liked a lot. But I like mint chocolate chip ice cream and what have you, so that's not too interesting of a favorite for me, I guess. But yeah, I liked it a lot.
All right, and my favorite, this was a hard one. I really liked both of the cakes, the butter cake and the strawberry shortcake. But I think what it comes down to, the cookie that was really the best was the white or the birthday cake blondie. I really liked the base of that. It was the kind of like a pretty straightforward sugar cookie-ish base with sprinkles and white chocolate chips, and really that I think that's my number one.
So yeah, 2 of the things we did try from Crumbl were actually pieces of cake, which I didn't even know they sold cake going into it. Oh, did you know that?
No, I didn't realize that.
But yeah, both the pieces of cake, the butter, what was it, butter cake, and then the strawberry shortcake were like amazing. I almost feel like we should like put them in the same category as the cookies because they're just like they're totally different thing. But Crumbl cookies makes good cake, so I'm just throwing that out there.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time on the next edition of this segment. And actually, this segment will wrap up this episode of Hold the Mustard. So special thanks to Rae Walseth and to my wife Molly, and to me, I guess, because I did the rest of it. I don't know how to sign off. I'm spiraling here, but thanks for listening, and don't forget to hold the mustard. This podcast is a production of the KendallCast Podcast Network. You can support the show for just $2 a month at patreon.com/KendallCast, or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at KendallCast.NINJA. Every little bit helps.